Yat A, Shio, and a warm welcome to the 14th speaker series, A Sense of Place, Indigenous Perspectives of Land, Water, and Sky. This series is being hosted by the Indigenous Education Institute. Today's session is supported by the Superfund of Oregon State University, PAH's New Technologies and Emerging Health Risks, led by our friend Diana Roman. It is also supported by the San Juan Island National Historic Park, led by Superintendent Alexis Freedy. My name is Dr. Nancy Maryboy. I'm Diné and Tsalagi, which means Navajo and Cherokee. My Cherokee name is Tsawayuga, and I'm from the Cherokee Bird Clan. I'm also from the Deer Springs Clan and Tsinjakini, the Honeycomb Rock Cliff Dweller Clan of the Diné. I'm the founding president and executive director of the Indigenous Education Institute. We've been in existence for more than 25 years. We're located in the San Juan Islands of Washington State and on the Navajo Nation, which you'll see behind me. That's my background. Over the past 4 years, we've presented 13 sessions of our original speaker series, featuring renowned Indigenous speakers from around the United States and Canada. So I would like to begin today with a heartfelt acknowledgement of the Indigenous peoples of our Mother Earth. Usually we acknowledge the land on which we are living or presenting, but on this day and age of virtual online realities and the pandemic of COVID-19, we wish to honor all Indigenous peoples around the world. I also want to acknowledge that I currently reside on the ancestral lands of the saltwater salmon people of the Salish Sea, who have called this place home since time immemorial. I honor the inherent and acquired treaty rights of these Indigenous peoples. The presentations in this series have been chosen to reflect an awareness of the foundations of traditional Indigenous thinking and living. In our native ways, everything is interconnected. So rather than a specific focus on biology or astronomy or other separate disciplines, we will be presenting dynamic worlds of interrelationships and processes of reciprocity. An additional focus for this speaker series is expanding awareness and understanding of cultural differences and to support successful and diverse working relationships, whether it be in education, national resource management, astronomy, NASA, museums, science centers, and or tribal communities. So today we are most honored to bring you Elizabeth Azzuz, Secretary of the Cultural Fire Management Council from the Yurok tribe, descended from the Kuroks. Elizabeth is a cultural fire practitioner who lives and works in her traditional territory, as she says, where the Trinity River flows into the Klamath River on the north coast of California. She's also the director of the Family Indigenous Burning Program for Cultural Fire Management Council and treasurer for the CFMC. I want to personally thank you for attending this webinar. The interest you have shown is heartwarming to me. We have over 600 people registered from all across the United States, and we have participants from Aotearoa, New Zealand, Canada, and Germany. It is also very interesting to me, and my favorite statistic, that we have today more than 90 different tribes represented in our registrations for this presentation. Almost all of our presentations for Sense of Place, Indigenous Perspectives on Land, Water, and Sky have been recorded. and can be downloaded at the Indigenous Education Institute website shortly following the events. Shortly means about a week or two. Since you have all registered by email, we will also share notices to you for upcoming presentations. And now it is my greatest pleasure to introduce you to Elizabeth Azzuz. Let's see.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
Thank you, Chris. Aikui, next now Elizabeth Azzuz, Wechwusag. I'm honored to be here. My name is Elizabeth Azzuz, and I'm from the village of Wechwus. I live directly above my family's village. We have a 500-year oral history of that village, and I am a cultural practitioner. I am a mother, a grandmother, a daughter, and I spend a great deal of my time out on the land, restoring our environment and caring for our people. I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Nancy, for having me. Would you like me to go ahead and continue? So Cultural Fire Management Council has been in this area for 11 years. We started out as a Building Healthy Communities initiative. A young man came into our territory and asked us what we wanted in our territory. You know, he told us we didn't have a store, we didn't have a church, we didn't have buses, we didn't have transportation. There was no hospitals, there was nothing here. And what did we want in this territory? What were we really just dying to have? And out of the 150 people in the room, they asked to bring fire back to the ground. They wanted to be able to restore their basket materials, their foods, their medicines. They wanted to restore their ecosystem. They wanted to be able to see as far as they could in the forest in any direction. And 11 years later, I'm happy to say that we are making headway. We're making serious progress in the being able to walk out into the forest and to see in any direction as far as we can see. We started this initiative basically because our basket weavers were running out of hazel. Our executive director had used everything that her mother and her grandmother had left. And it was her goal to create a traditional baby basket for every one of her grandchildren that was born. And in order to weave that, she required hazel. So hazel is a serotinous plant. Hazel requires fire to be pliable. The fire changes the molecular structure of those sticks. And when they come up in the spring and in the fall, they come up as nice, beautiful, tall shoots. Fire is the one thing that allows us to be able to use those plants and to make them pliable. We also use bear grass and ferns. Bear grass is a serotinous plant. It's usable if it's had fire, but if not, it's very, it can scratch you and it's just not pliable. It's not usable. It breaks. As far as our ferns, we burn down into the riparian areas. I should say we burn about 50 feet to the riparian areas because we don't want to introduce any type of fuel into our waterways, because one drop of a petroleum product can basically take out an entire ecosystem. And so we burn down into those riparian areas to take care of the woodwardia and the maidenhair ferns and the ferns that we use to weave the colors into our baskets. Alder is a riparian tree, and we use the bark to dye the woodwardia ferns red. The maidenhair ferns are black. And so everything that we gather from the land is used on daily. Our baby baskets that we carry our children in, our cooking baskets that we cook with, our acorn baskets that we eat out of, our trinket baskets. The Yurok-Kanhupa women are some of the greatest weavers, I believe, in the world. We have some of the most elaborate baskets I've ever seen. So back to what we do for Cultural Fire. Cultural Fire Management Council, like I said, started out for basket materials, but we've grown. We've spent countless years building this organization, and we are in the process of purchasing land. We're building a building, and hopefully we'll have the first prescribed fire training facility in California that is Indigenous and female run. We're very excited about that. And we also, as Cultural Fire Management Council, in our growing, in our expansion, we've added the Indigenous and family burning programs. Those are where we go out to people's homes. We teach them how to clear around their homes. We teach them how to create piles. And then we bring our equipment out and we help them. We have them do the ignitions and do the actual burn. And we just stand by with our trucks and with our equipment to make sure that they're safe. We also teach the younger generations. We bring children out from Head Start, preschool, into high school and college to basically learn about what we do, learn to care for the land. If we do not take care of our mother, we will not have a place to live. We won't have these amazing trees to provide our oxygen. We won't have these beautiful food plants and medicine plants and our basket plants. We won't have forage for our elk. One of our projects is meadow and prairie restoration. The prairie restoration project is really close to my heart. One of our original founders, he's passed now, Tom Wilson. He had a goal of bringing elk back to the prairie above his property for his grandchildren and his children. He wanted them to be able to hunt in their family's territory. And I'm honored to say that recently we have seen elk in that prairie. So we are definitely moving forward in our goals. We're definitely creating our vision. We're bringing it to life. And to be able to see all of these things come together and to realize how large we've grown. Our executive director and I, we used to work, well, still do occasionally work out of our living rooms. I work out of a big truck that actually has the capability for me to plug my computer in while I'm out burning and work right from my vehicle. So creating our prescribed fire training facility is a dream for me. I've always wanted it. I've always been pushing the executive director to get more funding, to buy land, to build this so we could have our own home and not have to use tribal facilities in order to be able to put on our training exchanges. So 3 times a year, Cultural Fire Management Council puts on a spring training exchange, it's 1 week, and a fall training exchange that's 2 weeks. We bring people from all over the world, all around the United States, and we train them about cultural burning, about prescribed fire, and how to work with the land, how to work with fire, how to work with the environment. It's an intensive training that I really enjoy, you know, the seeing someone have a drip torch in their hand for the first time and watching them absorb the knowledge that we're giving them, and then seeing them put that fire on the ground is just a feeling that you cannot get anywhere else in this world, to be honest. The smiles, the laughter, they literally almost remind me of children in a sense that, you know, you can see that they've opened their mind, they're absorbing that information, and they're really excited about what we're doing. So Cultural Fire Management Council is also part of an organization through the Nature Conservancy called the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network. We work with tribes across the United States. We help them to restore their burning rights, teach them about the permitting processes that are required from government agencies, state agencies. We walk them through the process. We teach them how to create their own prescribed fire agencies, their own training agencies. And it's just like, I get so excited about it. There's just no way for me to be able to contain the way I feel about this, because the more people that we have tending our Mother Earth, the more people that care about her, the more people that care about the water, the air, the people, you know, our future. For us, we look at everything in 7 generations. So when we do an ignition, a test fire, we call it, our executive director, Margot Robbins, and myself, we will take a traditional torch, which is wormwood. We use some pitchy sticks, and we also use angelica root, and we'll say an opening prayer, and we'll ask for permission from the land. We'll ask permission from the one-legged tree people and from the winged brothers and sisters and the four-leggeds. We ask permission to be able to come into their homes, to restore their environment, to be able to protect them, to be able to bring their food sources back, to make their water clean. One of the greatest things that I ever learned from Dr. Frank Lake from the Forest Service is that, you know, when we're burning, the smoke inversion layer can cool the water down by at least 10 degrees. And that helps the fish, helps our aquatic brothers and sisters to be able to have that clean, fresh oxygen, clean, healthy water to be able to live in. And as subsistence people, we hunt, we fish, we gather. Being able to go out and catch healthy salmon, sturgeon, eels, all of the aquatic life that, you know, we sustain our life off of, those things can't happen if we don't care for our environment. If we're not doing our job, restoring the land with fire, working with fire, allowing all of that fresh, clean water to get down into the water table, which in turn puts clean, fresh, healthy water into the rivers, the creeks, and out into the ocean. These are all things that, you know, we think about daily. As someone who's on the land, we care about our environment. We care about our people. We care that the 7 generations in the future will have the same amazing air and land that we have now. We want that to be here for eternity. I mean, our people have been on this land and caring for this land since time immemorial. And there is nothing greater than giving back to the land. Because once you do that, you've cared for your environment, you've cared for your elders, you've provided the foods that they so miss in their daily life. One of the greatest problems we have out here, health-wise, is diabetes and heart disease. That comes from processed foods. As an Indigenous person, you know, we hunted, we gathered, we got our food from the land, and we didn't have all the chemicals, all the processed food that people eat these days that cause them so much medical, so many medical problems. And it's nice to be able to know that our women are able to go out and to gather and to find these foods and provide them for their elders. Our acorns are a major food source for us. And so burning around those acorn stands and restoring them and caring for them is something that's just so overwhelming for us that, you know, you can't even fathom what it feels like to, you know, watch your younger generations and your older generations sitting together, eating a food that we've eaten since time immemorial. You know, watching the little kids loving having acorn soup with their elders, watching the elders enjoying the little kids playing in areas that we have worked in and made clean and healthy for them to be able to go out and to gather as a family. As a young person, I would go with my parents, my aunts and uncles, and we would gather wood and gather acorns and huckleberries, and the men would hunt. And then we'd go home and we'd process all these things together as a family. These are things that don't happen in daily life, in civilization. Most people don't even realize, you know, where their food comes from, you know, that comes from a grocery store as far as they're concerned. What really was hard for me once I left this extension of our reservation. Just so you know, I'm on the Yurok Reservation in Northern California. We're the largest tribe in California. I grew up here basically, you know, raising animals for our food. Our father would butcher a cow and a pig once a year. We always had, you know, homegrown food, gardens and things like that, and foods that we gathered. And when I actually left home and went out into civilization, I remember calling the local store, because we didn't even have phones at that time, and asked them to have my parents call me. And my mother thought something was wrong. And my question to her was, Mom, why doesn't this food have any flavor? And, you know, she kind of laughed at me and said, honey, you know, those people grow their food, you know, in water. They raise their animals, you know, with processed foods and, you know, things that we're not used to. And it was really an interesting change for me to go from living off the land to being in civilization. I can't say it was a wonderful experience right away, but I adapted, you know, managed to live out in civilization, go to college, raise my son, and then return back home to help restore our environment, restore our land. And part of Cultural Fire Management Council has been very healing for me, because I'm able to do those things. I'm able to go out, put prescribed fire on the ground with medicine. I'm able to gather the resources that are available to us after that. And I'm able to teach the younger generations how to do what we do. And during our training exchanges, we, like I said, we bring in people from all around the United States and around the world. We teach them about what we do, and then they come back as trainers. I usually laugh and call them our repeat offenders, because they come back and they train other people how to do what they learned from us. They take that information back to their own home territories and they teach people there how to do what they learned here. And it's been really amazing to watch this organization grow. We have approximately 20 employees now, between full-time and part-time. So we're one of the larger employers on the extension of the Yurok Reservation here in Wichita. And it's really nice to know that we're able to provide for young families, give them jobs. They're able to provide for their families and to, have nice vehicles, to have their homes taken care of, their families taken care of. That's all something that grew out of our need to be able to restore our environment. So, Cultural Fire Management Council is a nonprofit, Indigenous led. It has grown leaps and bounds. As I said, we're just waiting for our new engine to arrive. We have purchased a drone. We now have an aviation department. The young man is getting his hours so that he will be able to basically use a drone that we'll be buying for, let's see, I can't even remember. I believe they're called Dragon Eggs. They will be able to program in our units, and he'll be able to drop the pyro drone piece, the Dragon Balls, excuse me, directly into those units. We're in very steep territory, very steep terrain, rocky, mountainous, and some of our units are hard to traverse. And so the drone is a necessary purchase in order to keep our people safe during these trainings. We have a botany department. Claire takes her crew out. They photograph our units before, during, and after our burns. And so she knows where all the native plants are in our units. She goes back and replants those units with students who helped her gather native seeds. And so it's really nice to watch this grow and to see this happen. And to be able to know that everything that we're doing is making a difference in our environment, that makes, oh gosh, I don't even know how to say this in a way that people would understand. But, for somebody who lives off the land, somebody who enjoys spending all their time in the mountains, who enjoys foraging, our territory is one of the most amazing places to be able to do that. Because not only has Claire created maps that tell us where all of our native plants are, she also knows where all the invasive species are, and we're actively removing those from our territory. And so to be able to go out in these units and see the wildlife come back, to see the bears, the deer, the elk, the mountain lions, the bobcats, all of the things we see in our units, they're all moving healthy and having all of their food sources restored for them. Recently, I had an elder gentleman tell me that he was so proud of us because for the first time, and he can't remember how long, he was able to hunt for a deer that did not have tumors in it. And he felt the meat even tasted better. It was healthier for him. And that really made me feel like, everything that we're doing is moving in the right direction, that we're doing what we need to do as an Indigenous group to care for our environment, to care for our people. And having our elders happy, that's one of my greatest goals, because at 4 years old, my grandfather caught me playing with fire and decided that if I thought I was old enough to play with fire, that it was time for me to learn my place as a true human being. He said, as a true human being, we have a responsibility to the mother. We have to care for her. We do not play with fire. Fire is not a toy. Fire is a tool. He taught me that fire was family and that fire was something that we worked with. He said, you don't fight with family and you don't fight with fire. You work with them. He said, and only then will you understand what it means to be able to restore your environment and to care for the people. It took me a long time to understand exactly what he meant, but at my age now, I truly understand what it means to be a true human being and what it means to care for our land and our people. And I always tell people in the presentations I do, if we do not care for our Mother Earth, we will not have this beautiful place to live on. We will not have this air. We will not have this water. We will not have our foods and our medicines that we're used to. And so, you know, part of our teachings, part of what we do as Cultural Fire is we do presentations. We teach people about our basket materials. We show them our baskets. We teach people about our songs. We teach people about our stories. We tell stories. We bring out storytellers to talk about, you know, our creation stories, to talk about how the animals got fire from the spirit beings and how they brought it to the people. There's just so much that Indigenous communities have that they need to be able to teach civilization in general, because civilization has lost touch with the Mother Earth. To them, it's just go, 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 work constantly, make more money, provide for my family, but they never realize what's around them. They don't realize that if we don't slow down and stop, if we don't take that deep breath, if we don't care for our environment, our children and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have nothing. We'll literally destroy everything we need to survive as a species. And that is not the direction I want to go in. It's definitely not the direction anyone should want to go in. And I honestly, truly believe that, you know, if we all can work together, come together, decide that the earth is more important than anything else, that all of our people around the world will be in a much better place. Part of our organization, we have the Indigenous Peoples Burning Network, where we reach out, like I said, to tribes across the world, across the United States, and help them to regain their burning rights. Many tribes have lost all rights. We don't have the right to care for our land. We don't have the right to even speak our languages in some territories. And we're still really held under the thumb of society in general, which is really painful for me, considering that English was not my first language. And now I understand some of my family's conversations, but I don't speak any longer. So I'm Yura Karuk, and I have Danish ancestors. And so I've always lived and grown up on this river. I know what the river can provide for me, and I know what happens to her when she's not healthy. In our extension of the reservation, the dams are coming down in the Oregon area, in Southern Oregon, that have destroyed our rivers, have destroyed our environment, have caused massive fish kills because of everything that's in those dams. And to have those dams coming down, our people are so excited. We're so happy. And to know that we'll be able to go back to our cultural way of life and be able to have our ceremonies and to be able to hunt and fish and gather in a healthy environment again is so overwhelming. I just can't even imagine, you know, what it will be like when the last dam comes down and when everything comes back to a healthy state. I'm looking forward to that immensely. And sorry for rambling. I get so excited about everything that we do, but I just would like people to know that Cultural Fire Management Council is out there. We are available to meet with organizations, with tribes, with government entities. We're available to answer those questions. We want people to know what it's like to work with an Indigenous organization. We want to be able to work with the agencies that require us to do permitting, that require so many of the things that we have to do to be able to function as an organization. And so with that, I think I should turn it over to Nancy, because I don't want to run out of time for questions.
Oh, Elizabeth, I could just sit by you and listen to you for hours. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your words and your thoughts and how beautifully you put them as they come out of your mouth. And gosh, I think when you said something like asking the land, what do you need from us? You almost never hear anybody thinking that way. And yet that's a core question. You know, it's just I think it just inspires us to try to do better. So basically, we do have questions for you. I think I'll turn it over to Polly, and And there have been some very nice chats coming up. If any of you, Polly or Elizabeth, or I'm sure Chris is monitoring them, um, that may have more questions, and just people from all over. There's so much enthusiasm and energy coming from screen to screen on this Zoom thing we're using. So, but I just want you to know, I thank you with all my heart for your words that you shared today. And it makes me smile. One of the persons that signed up was is from the New York Times, and I'm just curious now, and I'm hopeful now that she will take your message further. Well, I guess we may never know, or we may find out. Anyway, I will turn it over to dear friend Polly, and so there you go, Polly.
I want to echo what Nancy said with a thanks from my heart. Wado, fire is central to the Cherokee people, Dachila. And to hear you talk about, we hear so often about the fear of fires, which of course, when they get out of control, they are fierce. But to you talk about this different relationship with fire, it's respectful, reciprocal relationality really makes my heart sing. So from my heart, Wado. And I'll start, I think, with the question I mentioned before. There was sort of a pattern in the questions that came in before. And while we're doing this, I would encourage all of you in the audience to please post your questions in the chat. And I can field some of those or integrate some of those. But the question I think that came through most in the beginning was, what would be your advice on tribal communities and government agencies working together collaboratively around fire?
Very interesting. I've been asked that quite a bit lately, and what I always tend to tell Indigenous organizations is walk up to the table, pull out the chair, sit down, and tell them I'm here. We want to know how we can work together. We want to know how we can make this work for everybody. Indigenous organizations aren't always invited to the table. We're probably the last group that's even thought about in any of these conversations. And it's really interesting to me because we are the caretakers of this land. It's our directive from the Creator to care for this environment that was left for us. It was beautiful and healthy and provided everything we needed, and it's our responsibility to care for that. And so I feel that those organizations should be thinking about the Indigenous populations, because when the Europeans arrived here, they saw this beautiful park-like state and they thought, oh my God, this is the most wonderful place in the world. Well, the Indigenous people that live there also felt that way, and they also cared for that land, and we still do. And so I really honestly believe that those government agencies are the ones that need to be reaching out to us. But in the meantime, always, always sit down at that table. I'm here. I want to know how to work with you. I want to know how you can work with us. And I want to know what we can do to make our world better.
Thank you for that. It's a very powerful and proactive response to the situations that we find ourselves in. I'm sure you heard about the devastating fires here in New Mexico last year. And, we need that knowledge. Mother Earth needs sharing that knowledge of tribal peoples. Yeah. Here's another question that's come in. What is known about fire before Indigenous peoples in your lands?
Well, all of my teachings come from my ancestors, and there's at no point ever that we weren't talked about as the people, that we weren't discussed as being here. And so I'm not sure I can answer that question, because since time immemorial, Indigenous people have been on this land and have cared for this land. So all of our fire history tells us that we have been here and worked together and cared for the environment. I'm not sure I can answer that any other way.
Well, here's another question that's come in. Can you help speak to the damage of herbicide versus fire to help fight protecting our land from poison?
Yeah, it's actually a really sore topic with me currently. Our burn boss and myself, young Robert McConnell, we recently came back from burning with the Park Service, and we were just devastated to see all of the dead trees, the dead hardwoods standing in some of the logging landings. You know, these agencies that come in here and buy up mass pieces of land or took land from the indigenous people that were here under false pretenses, have used chemicals on our land, which have severely, oh my gosh, I can't even put this into words. So I've actually had family members that have lost children because of all of the spraying that's gone on in these forestry units, these forest logging units. Our reservation, the Yurok Reservation, has a policy. There are no herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, no chemicals allowed in our reservation, purposely put here by humans. So all of our gardens, our community gardens are organic. All of, you know, our orchards are cared for with natural means. We really have a hard time fighting with these logging agencies and convincing them that it's so wrong for them to spray all these chemicals into our environment, where we have so many indigenous people that are coming up with cancer now. You know, stillborns. We have so many things that we're still fighting with in our extension of this reservation. I'm sure tribes across the United States are all suffering the same thing, because humans don't realize that everything you put on our mother comes back into us. You know, everything you spray out into the air comes back into the people. You know, that's one thing. Pull up that chair, get to that table and tell them, you know, we are here, we live here, we subsist off this land. Stop trying to poison us.
And that deep interconnectedness, as you said, you know, what happens to the land happens to us, and what happens to us happens to the land. We had another question. Someone wanted to know more about what you said about seeing as far as you could see with the good fire management. Did they say, does that mean trees or underbrush or combination of both?
You know, we're really lucky in the Witchpeck area, because we have a lot of older families that have tended their land for as long as I can remember. And even when we were in a fire exclusion zone or time, I was taught as a young person to fear the green trucks and the red trucks. If I saw them, I was to run. The elders didn't believe that they would shoot a child. But in my lifetime, I have family members that are not allowed to touch flint, matches, lighters, nothing that could produce fire. Because even though they were tending for their family's land, they are now felons for working with fire. So for me, that means clearing the understory, getting rid of 200 years of dead and down fuels that are destroying our environments, that are sucking all the water up from the trees, not even allowing it to get into the water tables. My father, I was basically, I would say, his bloodhound when I was younger, because when we would go hunting, I could smell the blood of an animal. And so in order to get through all this brush and rubbish that was on the ground, I was the one who would go in and basically track this animal down. It was kind of funny. But now in the territories where we're burning and where we're working, we can actively walk through those forests without having to climb over all that dead and down brush, without having to struggle to be there. We can find the foods and the medicines so easy. They're available, they're right there, they're visible. We can walk right up to them. And it's just, it was my father's goal, and it's been a driving force for me for years.
Thanks so much for sharing that story. I just can imagine it as you're sharing that, both the smell of the animal.
Oh, yeah.
And that being able to move freely through there.
Mm-hmm.
We have a couple of interesting questions that have come through in the question and answer. One person writes and says they really want to know more about the ways that stories can spread awareness of this knowledge, and your advice on how could writers use fiction to help move this relational relationship with fire in a good way.
Yeah. So coming from a culture that has an oral history, a lot of what I learned came from my elders. And I'm sure most Indigenous cultures are this way. We're never above our elders. You know, we were always taught to be below them, to sit below them, to listen to them, to hear the stories of who we were and what we are and what we're expected to be. And so for me, storytelling is really all about talking about who we are as people, talking about who we are to the land and what our responsibilities are. And when people are able to sit down and articulate that, it really comes out into this just wonderful story of what the environment needs, what the people need, what the land needs. You know, for me, I don't get up in the morning and say, you know, this is what I need, this is what I have to do, this is my goal, this is my focus. It's more about, what do I have to do for the land today? What are we doing for her? You know, what are we doing for our water? Are we caring for our environment? I have grandchildren that I adore and, you know, love to take them out gathering, love to spend time with them and, you know, telling them little stories. They love the creation story, the fire stories and the things that, you know, we talk about. And it's just really nice to be able to, I have to say, I read more from Indigenous writers when it comes to the land and the environment, because we're more connected. We care more about what happens to the people and to the land. And so, you know, if you're going to write a story about us, spend time with us, learn from us, be on the land, you know, smell the air, smell the water. You can smell the teas as they're growing, you know, you can smell the foods, you know, you need to be connected to the land to be able to write about her.
Thank you for that. We've lots and lots of questions coming in, and we may not have time for them all, but I'm going to do my best here. So one that says, I'm currently creating hybrid fire training courses, a blend of online and in person, and am committed to adding the elements of cultural fire and caring for the earth that you're sharing with us, both to NWCG and private lands classes. What is the best way to collaborate with your program so that current fire training becomes this true fire learning?
Well, culturalfiremanagement.org, either Elizabeth or Margot, you'll be able to reach one of us and we'll be able to walk people through this. Our training exchanges are all NWCG qualified participants. We require our trainees to come in with a basic 32. And a lot of the trainees that come in actually are looking to increase their NWCG qualifications. And even though we are a traditional prescribed fire or cultural burning agency, we do realize that the government agencies are still in charge of, you know, the fire world. And so we actively make sure that all of our participants, all of our trainees, all of our employees are NWCG qualified. And we integrate that into our training. We basically decolonize it and turn it into something that works well with Indigenous people. We've had pretty serious discussions on, you know, the Alpha, Zulu, Delta, all these different, you know, terminologies that are used by government agencies when they set out to a wildfire or when they go out to do any type of burning. Everything is very governmentalized. And it's really hard for me to, number one, want to be in that environment. And so, like I said, we'll set out to decolonize their way of thinking and to bring them into a more personal relationship with the environment and the people. So reach out to Cultural Fire Management Council. We'll be more than happy to walk people through what we do. And we've been known to travel to go to other people's territory to help them put fire on the land and to see how they do it and to look at their techniques.
That decolonization is such an important aspect of this work. What you said, to, you know, to have that place at the table always and be invited and be listened to. We have a couple of questions about invasive species. They're curious about your perspective on how invasive species like annual grasses and other aggressive weeds affect how you use fire.
Yeah, so gosh, I wish Claire was here right now to answer that question. So right now, currently, something that we're fighting against is Scotch broom and French broom and Pappas grass. These are things that are highly invasive in our territory and that we are actively cutting, pulling, burning. The French broom, Scotch broom, their seeds can lay dormant for 70 years. We don't know what intensity of heat causes them to pop. And so we're actively in a battle with them, I should say. So we've cut them all down and burned them at really high heat to see how that does. We have some areas where we've just pulled them, some areas, there's multiple projects going on around that. Our last burn we just did in June, we hit a Scotch broom patch or a French broom patch. I have not seen any of the little babies come up. I'm really excited. I'm hoping that in the 5th year of burning this, that we may be making progress. But Claire goes out and she actively checks all of our units to see what's in there. And then, like I said, the students that she takes to gather the native seeds, native grasses, and native plants, they go out and replant those about 6 weeks after we burn. And then she takes the kids back out to look at them and see how are they doing? How's the plant? Is it happy in its environment? Is it going to grow there? Do we need to move another type of native plant in there? And she's really good at what she does. So I would have to defer to Claire to be able to answer that question.
Yeah, so I must have missed a question here, but this person kindly asked another question and said, there are an increased knowledge fire regarding the topic of fire. I'm very familiar with Hawaiian and Polynesian way of life and should be included when Indigenous knowledge is taught at the University of Hawaii. How would you widen the scope of fire, air, and caring for Mother Earth?
Wow, that's a big one. Something we do here in our environment is like a good month, 2 months before we're getting ready to do a burn, is we track the weather. We track everything that's happening. What are the wind patterns? What are the humidities? What's happening in our environment? We know what time of the day the wind shifts, what time the wind goes upriver, what time it comes back downriver. Those are all things that need to be done by people who live on the land. Those are things that happen with Indigenous people who are attuned to their environment. And I wouldn't even know how to teach someone else how to do that, to be honest. I've been lucky to be exposed to my elders and to hear their stories and to know what it is to be on this land. And we literally have to go out into other people's territory when we visit and spend time out there walking around, watching their wind patterns, watching the environment, watching what time, things shift in their territory to know when we can even do an ignition, let alone when we should be letting everything cool down so it will put itself out. So Mother Nature will help us with that. We work with the environment in order to do that. We know that when the sun's setting, our fire is going to cool down and everything's going to slow down and eventually going to put itself out. But that's something that comes from being on the land. It really honestly requires Indigenous practitioners to be able to do that because they know what the land is going to do.
I think it's that a lot of our work with IEIs is all arises from place and our relationships of respect and relationality with place.
Absolutely.
Quite different question here. Do you see a connection between your work and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
I haven't been involved too much with the United Nations Sustainable Goals. I participated in some projects with Rising Voices. They're an organization in Colorado where we are able to sit at the table and talk with a lot of those groups. But mostly I focus on our environment, our territory. It requires a lot of time and effort to do what we do here. And I'm sad to say I'm not keeping up with the rest of the world as much as I should, probably living off grid.
I have been able to track down this question that I lost. The person asked me to please look for it. It says current legislative efforts at both local, state, and federal government regarding sustainability, climate change, and food sovereignty, as well as land management. So I'm thinking maybe this person saying, could you speak to current legislative efforts at these different levels?
With what I know, yeah. So our organization has been involved, and mostly our executive director, with meeting with government agencies and helping legislation get pushed through for, prescribed fire lighters, prescribed burn bosses, cultural burn bosses, things that don't require all the NWCG qualifications. But even that has been bottlenecked in various government agencies because as much as people say they want to allow Indigenous people to care for the land, they really have a fear that we don't know what we're doing. And so there's always a stopgap to that. It doesn't always move through legislative bodies as it should. We've both presented to Congress. We've both talked about things that Indigenous people need to have access to, that other people need to know what we're capable of. But as far as all of the bills and the legislations that are going on right now, I honestly can't answer that question fully. I just know that we actively meet with those organizations to try to push our narrative, to try to get rights for Indigenous practitioners all over the world, not just ourselves, because there's so much going on in the world right now that could be done in a better way. You know, if people could just work together and have those conversations and realize that it's not just the dollar that's driving this country, it's the country that's pushing those people to think that they're in charge of it. You know, we're not in charge of the world just because we have a lot of money. We don't have a right to destroy the water. We don't have a right to destroy all her natural resources just because we want to become rich. We need to be able to take care of the land so that we have somewhere to be, so that we have somewhere to raise our families. And all of these government agencies and all of these huge corporations, I can guarantee you they have not one single thought about any of that, because all they see is their boardrooms. All they see is their offices. They never walk outside of there to see what's going on. It kind of reminds me of the weatherman when he says it's 100 degrees outside, but I have torrential rain. You know, I'm not sure he walks outside and sees what's going on in the world. I'll agree to disagree with him occasionally.
And I think that you raised a very important issue there too, about that fear that we want listen, but not really listening too deeply because you might not know what you're talking about. I think that colonial mentality still impacts a lot of the work that we all do. And here's a question I want to share with you. It says, thank you so very much for sharing your work and making it the work of every human being. Can you speak to the fires which go wild and make humans feel so helpless in the midst of this fear? What would you say to hold the hearts of those humans who are terrified of wildfires? Sacred meanings beyond the human understanding.
Yeah, so we've had some discussions about Smokey the Bear. Smokey has taught an entire generations of people to fear fire. As an Indigenous person who has worked with fire most of her life, who receives joy from working with fire, who feels it to my soles of my feet. Honestly, it is part of my being. Those types of things, you know, are something that you're raised with. Those are things that you feel in your person. Wildfires, yes, they are out of control. They're raging. They're destroying huge land masses. They're destroying populations. They're destroying homes. But if you look at these old fire footprints, a lot of those places historically have had fire since time immemorial. It's just that humans didn't pay attention to where those fire footprints were, and they built massive cities on top of them. They built massive organizations where fire has always been, and didn't take into account that fire is a being of herself, that she will always come back to where she's comfortable. She'll always come back to where she needs to be able to do her job. I'm actively watching some of the wildfires now that are being managed by some of the government agencies, and I'm honestly happy to see them managing them. Yes, we have increased smoke. Yes, our air quality days are a little worse during that time. But all of that fire that's out there raging in the wilderness right now is cleaning up an old fire footprint. And when fire comes to the edge of its stopping point, where it had stopped since time immemorial, it will stop again. Man is just actively managing right now in order to make it safer for everyone that lives in this environment. I see it in a different way than most people. People who fear fire are going to be like, oh my God, you got to put all these things out. You got to make them go away. They're destroying everything. I see it as Mother Nature cleaning up her floor, Mother Nature making it more comfortable for us in the future, so that we don't have these massive land masses that are covered with down and dead debris, 200-300 years worth of basically nature's trash. You know, there are trees that have come down and not been able to be taken care of because government agencies don't believe the indigenous people know how to do that. There are areas that have been neglected because they're out in the wilderness. There are parks that a lot of people don't want to see fire in because, oh my God, you're going to destroy it. Well, if you ever go into a park that's managed by fire and you see how beautiful the environment is, you see the wildflowers, you see the wild grasses, you see the plants that nature intended to be there, you'll see the difference. You'll know that fire is doing her job, that she is working with her sister, the Mother Earth, and they are cleaning their environment and they are making it possible for people to thrive. And that's all I have to say about fire.
So beautiful. We have a related question coming in about, because you talk about some people who don't see that, you know, relationship and the beauty, and said, how do you talk or how do you speak with people or communicate with people who are against prescribed burns?
Well, first I listen. I listen to them. I hear their story. I know how they feel. That doesn't mean that we're going to agree. Most of the time we'll agree to disagree. But I really understand what it means. I mean, my family has lost a home to fire, not natural fire or forest fire, but my parents lost a home. Hot water tank exploded and basically took my parents home in a mushroom cloud. So I know what it's like to lose everything. I know what it's like to have to try to dig through that rubble and try to find any remnants of your life that was there before that. But I also know what it's like to rebuild that and to have a sense of community that comes together and helps those families rebuild, and to help them understand, you know, what has happened and what they need to do to be able to work with that. Fire is always going to be a destructive force. That is her way. She can't help herself. She is wind driven. She's air driven. You know, she's part of her environment. It's up to us to learn how to fire harden our homes. There are ways to fire harden your environment so that you're not spreading bark all around your house. Maybe you're putting lava rocks, or maybe you're putting gravel, or maybe you're putting something else that may not look as beautiful to you, but Mother Nature won't love her as much as she would the bark. You know, there are ways to build roofs on your home that are fire hardened. There are materials you can use to build your homes with. UC Davis right now has this amazing project where they're looking at building homes similar to styles that were built centuries ago, you know, where they were built with adobe, or where they were built like, you know, cave dwelling type situations where you're using Mother Earth's materials to save yourself. If we spend more time working with nature and living with nature, we understand what it's like to be able to survive in her environment, because Mother Nature can be harsh. There's floodings, there's storms, there's hurricanes, you know, there's fire. There's everything that Mother Nature is famous for. We need to learn to live with all those things within our means.
Absolutely. And Nancy, I'm going to do a quick time check with you. I have a couple of other questions, but how much more time would you say that we have?
Let's take some more. It's up to Elizabeth. We have time, and if people need to go, they can go, and if people want to stay, they can stay. It's a fascinating discussion. And can I pop in a question?
Let me ask one, and then I'll come back to you. How's that?
Okay.
This one I think that fits really well with what she's just been saying now. It says, could you please share current plans / agenda for our children and our 25-year future?
So as I was saying, with Cultural Fire Management Council, we work very closely with the schools, preschool through college. We bring out the young students, we bring them to our base wherever we're stationed when we're doing our training exchanges, and we let the little ones climb all over the engines and run the whistles and the lights and the water, squirt each other, do whatever they want to do. You know, we get them comfortable with everything that we work with, and we teach them you know, what it's like to work with fire, what it's like to listen to fire. You know, fire has a voice. Fire talks to you, and you know when she's going to get really hot, you know when she's going to run, you know when she's going to cool down, and when she's going to take a nap, you know, if you pay attention to her. And those are things that we need to start teaching our younger generations. We need to start reminding them that we're connected to this land, that we're all connected to each other, and that the more we work together, the better off we'll all be. We have generations out here of young children who know about cultural fire, who know about what we do. And you can actually go to their classrooms and have conversations with them. And they're some of the most amazing conversations you've ever had, because these young people grew up in cultural families. They've hunted, they've fished, they've gathered, they're in ceremony. You know that their world revolves around their environment and revolves around the Mother Earth. And there is nothing greater than being in a group full of children who have the same feeling about the planet that you do. And that, you know, you can walk into that room and know that the conversation you're going to have is going to resonate with them. It's not the same so much when we leave our own environment. There's so many questions, there's so much fear, there's just, people are, you know, not sure about what's happening in their world. They don't know where they fit. They don't know what, you know, what to do. You know, I speak with a lot of people in presentations, and a young group from Yale, they said to me, you know, what do you think I should do, you know, after this presentation? And I said, you know, I would like you to go meet one of your neighbors. Find an elder that maybe doesn't have someone to help them, you know, pack their groceries in for them, maybe check their mail, spend a little time with them, find out who they are. You know, where'd they come from? What's their background? What do they want out of their life? Or what have they lived in their life? It's really amazing to see the look on a young person's face when they're like, what? I mean, for me, when I left home, I realized that civilization doesn't really care about its neighbors. You go to work, you come home, you make dinner, you get your kids to bed, or you get yourself to bed, you get up and you do it again. You know, you can live in a neighborhood for years and not know your neighbors. I mean, how do people do that? Out here, we're a little different because we're in a very rural extension of our reservation, and everybody knows everybody else's business. Everybody knows who goes to work at what time and what they do and where they are and, you know, what their function is. In civilization in general, people don't know that about each other. They don't really even care about their neighbors. And that's kind of disheartening for me. Because for me, I love to, you know, check on my neighbors, see what they're up to. What are you guys doing? Do you need something? You're out of firewood? You know, did you get fish this year? Did you get huckleberries? Did somebody bring you elderberries? Or, you know, just, it's our daily life. And that doesn't happen in civilization. That's really hard for me to understand.
And I think that's so important, that our relationship with each other echoes our relationship with fire. On the interconnected, as Nancy says. And to Nancy's question now.
Well, I think, no, you're doing such a great job, Polly. You carry on with the ones from our participants. If there's time later, I'll ask. It's kind of off the subject a little bit. So
someone wrote in and said, could you share an example or a story of one of your collaborations between your tribe and government of state agencies?
Yeah. As I had mentioned before, you know, my fear of the red trucks and the green trucks. That was a healthy fear that I didn't realize was so instilled in me until we started working with CAL FIRE. Every time they would pull up on one of our burns, I would get a stomach ache. I would get a knot in my stomach, and I'd be like, oh my God, they're here, you know, are we doing everything right? Do we have our paperwork? Where's my binder? Is everything in it? All the permits, it's everything there. And then I got to a point where they pulled up on the unit and I was actually happy to see them. I was like, oh my gosh, you're here. You know, what do you guys want to do? Where do you want to plug in? What do you want to do today? Are you just here to observe? Do you get to participate? You know, what's the activity happening for the day? You know, that was a really great feeling for me, because I went from years of fear of these organizations to realizing that if you build those relationships with them, if you have those conversations, if you all have a common goal, that it's not so frightening anymore, that, you know, you can work together. And I realized that, you know, my grandmother used to say, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar. what's actually true. Because the more you build a relationship with an organization, the more comfortable they become with you, the more willing they are to work with you. And we're in a position now with CAL FIRE where they come out, they look at our units, they know what our level of work is, they sign our permits, they're right there with us. They actively say, you know, if you guys need any help, just call us, we'll come out. You know, we want to be here. It's just a great feeling to be able to have those groups recognize us and our skill level and know that we're in a position now to be at that table with them.
And I think in addition to what you so clearly articulated, you know, underlying what you're saying too is the importance of that long-term relationship. It's not a one-night workshop and it's all over, but how do we have those hard conversations and how do we build those relationships so that trust can be restored?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll add something to that one though. With IEI, we've been in, you know, in existence for about 25 years. And during that time, we've made the most wonderful allies. And, you know, sometimes people working with tribes feel like they're not respected or there's, you know, tension or something. But in our case, we have these wonderful people we've worked with those long-term relationships you were both alluding to. And truly, if it wasn't for our allies, you know, taking up our cause and helping us out there and knowing the right language to use with the agencies and that stressing sometimes commonalities instead of differences, go a long way. And I loved what you said about them. They want the partnerships are stronger and they go forward. I just affirm what
Yeah, recently, a presentation I did, there was some gentlemen there from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I found it really interesting that they had stated they didn't know that these Indigenous fire practitioner organizations existed. And I had said to one of the gentlemen, I said, well, that's really funny because for like the last 8 years, we've been trying to get a burn plan pushed through your office so we can burn one of our units that has a lot of bear grass in it. I said, and you know, our response is always no phone call, no return emails, no, you know, I would like to know how to work with you also. I would like to know that you're there to help the Indigenous people, you know, do what they want to do with the environment and care for the environment. But I was really taken aback when they said that they didn't even know that some of our organizations even existed. And they were there actually at that presentation to learn how to work with Indigenous organizations and to know who we were. And I would have thought that the Bureau of Indian Affairs would have been more attuned to Indigenous organizations and already know how to work with them, considering their history with Indigenous people.
So there's a lot of work remaining to be done, a lot of discussion,
Absolutely.
a lot of relationships to be built. We have a question come in about climate change. It says, what about wildfires and climate disasters induced by human-made climate change and global warming?
That is a really loaded question. You know, here in our territory, I'm lucky to be able to spend a lot of time on the land. And so I know that our growing times are shorter. Our times that we would normally plant our gardens are about 3 months advanced. I guess I would have to start 3 months before I normally would to plant a garden. I know that, you know, our rainy seasons are different. People who are on the land really pay attention to these things. I've been following actually the Inuit elders who had been telling NASA for I don't know how many years that the polar axis had shifted and no one was listening to them. And I thought, you know, if it were up to the Indigenous people, we would have paid attention to our Mother Earth and where she's at. We would know that our climate is shifting. We would know that our environment is different. We would know that our weather patterns are different. But how do you teach the scientists that know everything that they don't really know everything? That they're not really out on the land. They're not really paying attention to the people who are. And that if we don't get on the same page real soon, we're all going to be in serious trouble. I mean, most of the things that are happening right now on our planet are caused by human beings because of our need to have more, our need to control everything. You know, that's not the way the world is. We have to be symbiotic with our environment and with society in order to survive. And most people can't do that. You know, that's going to be the hard lesson. That's going to be the hurdle. And teaching people that climate change is actually real. You can look at it if you're out in it and you can know that everything has shifted. But if you sit in that lab and you look at that microscope or you stare at that computer screen all day, you don't see any of that. You see graphs, you see charts, you see things that tell you, oh my God, this is happening. Just go outside. Go outside and look at the Mother Earth and see what she's suffering at the hands of all the human beings. And you will know that climate change is real. And you will know that she will continue to affect us in a negative way if we don't start getting it right.
I think we've seen that a lot in our work with IEI, impactful stories from, astronomers who say, oh, when you actually go outside and look and you're there on the land, you see something that we didn't know we see through our telescopes. We have a comment and a question here. It says, hi, Elizabeth. I had the honor to burn with you at Trex last year. It's great to see you. I've been thinking about how we talk about and to fire as a living being and how it's different than the language Western science uses to describe fire as a physical or chemical process. Do you think the language we use matters?
Absolutely. I do think the language matters. When we go out into our units and we put medicine down on the ground and we ask permission from the land to be able to come into their environment and to burn, and you ask the tree people and you ask the winged brothers and sisters, you're actually including your environment in what you're doing. You're spending time getting permission from your ancestors, from the creatures that live there, from the beings that live there. We've actively shut down some of our burns because we found baby bears and baby birds and things that weren't able to move themselves from those units. That means that we have to not burn there. It means that we don't have the right to go into their home and destroy their environment, that their home is not ready to be cleaned up just yet. Means we need to wait. We as human beings need to be responsible for what we do in that environment. And until we're able to do that, until we're able to actively communicate with nature, to communicate with the people that are there, to teach people that we don't have the right to destroy something that's not ours, we're not going to get to a point we need to be. I mean, for me, I always kind of laugh when I go out into units with people, because when birds are talking to me, I'm like, I know we're only here for a short amount of time. We're just talking in this space. We're not going to actually do nothing right now. And then when we come back later, it's like, we're going to be putting fire on the ground. I hope you're able to move into another environment. We're doing this to get rid of this, that, or the other. I mean, I actually talk to the environment. I talk to the creatures that live there. I have a responsibility to them. It's not just me against the world. It's me with the world, and the more of us that can actually be on that same page, the more of us that can have that communication with their environment. Don't feel crazy about it. It's natural. It's normal. If you got to do it in your head, do it in your head. If you're like me and you want to just talk to nature, go ahead and talk to nature. But fit in your environment, care about it. Realize that, that beautiful lake or stream or ocean or whatever it is you're seeing won't be beautiful if we don't do our job. We have to do our job.
Well, I've been so touched both by your presentation and your responses. And my apologies to any of you who are on. If I missed your question, I tried to catch them and to integrate them, but I don't see any new questions coming in, Nancy. So I think I'll turn it back over to you. And you're muted.
I guess my dream of sitting here all afternoon listening to Elizabeth and you realized But I love this so much. I do have one question. I'm very interested in what we call grandfather trees or grandmother trees and their
Mhm.
abilities, their talents, their ability to withstand fire, perhaps, or the knowledge they carry. I wonder if you just would say a few words about them.
Well, you know, I'm blessed to live in a territory where we have massive redwoods and cedars. We have our elder trees. Oh my gosh, they're just so much of our environment and so much of who we are that I don't think of them as separate beings. They're our elders, they're our ancestors. They carry our knowledge. Some of them have been here longer than humans have been here, which isn't a really amazing thing. And so, other than to say that they're magical, mystical beings that withstand the environment. I mean, you know, redwoods, basically everybody says, oh, their food is fog. You know, we're actually getting ready to restore one of our redwood stands in our territory. And we've been actively working with the Park Service, who also has a lot of redwoods in their state park. We're working with our tribal departments. Cultural Fire is a nonprofit. It's separate from a tribal entity, but we are Yurok tribal members. And so we work with all those tribal departments to see what their research is saying, you know, what's happening in their territories with those trees, and how can we work with them in a way that we're not going to harm them. It's been really interesting to learn a few things as I go, because, you know, even though at my age, I feel like I know a lot, there's still something to learn every day. One of my elders had said to me, you know, it's really funny that your little cousin has a redwood deck, but you have a cedar deck. And I said, well, she's on the coast or closer to the coast, and I'm further towards the mountains. And that's just something that I never really thought about, is the more coastal the Yuroks are, the more they use redwood, but the further up the river they are, the more we use cedar. And we care for those things as we would a human being. You know, we try to protect them, we try to care for them. And so they have a voice all of their own, and we just need to be able to listen to it.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, I guess I will just have a couple of closing remarks here. One thing is, people usually ask, so I'm telling it again, all this recording has, this session has been recorded, as almost all of our other sessions, and you can go to them. Chris will be posting them in about a week or 2 weeks, and you will be able to go into our website, which is, he will post as soon as this part is over, but it's indigenouseducation.org. And you will be able to download this talk, and I think you were able to see all the chats too, as they've been very interesting. So basically, just know you'll be able to go in, download them. My challenge to you all is share the recording with at least another person, so that this message can continue to go out there and be heard. So a lot of professors are actually using all of these as in classrooms, from community colleges to Harvard and Yale. They're becoming part of the curriculum. So we never know where these go, but I know they go out there. So anyway, that's one thing I wanted to emphasize. And in closing, I say this every time, but it's so important. I want to expend a very special thank you to our technical support, Christopher Tarrant, my son, of Tarrant Solutions, Friday Harbor, Washington. Every time we host one of these speakers, there's so much work that goes on behind the scenes. The coyote factor, which is the Navajo disruptor and the one who brings chaos, is always lurking somewhere. And Chris is the one who always comes up with a plan B or C to counter possible chaos. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Molly, for the questions, and thank you so much, so much. Yeah, Elizabeth. We'll be sending out an email to you just after this presentation with a very short survey. Please take the time to answer the questions, because your responses are really helpful for us to inform our future program design. So from all of us to all of you, Thank you. Wado and Ahihe.
Wow.